people who really just think AI is going to go away. That
Yeah,
there's
it's not.
something here that this isn't real. The systems aren't as good as you say they are. They make mistakes. This is real. Companies are I talk to CEOs all the time. They are getting value out of it. Like it's funny because they'll say things like, 10 million, 20 million here, nothing significant yet. But like they're getting value out of these systems. There has not been major layoffs because of AI yet. I don't think that continues infinitely. Maybe people
No.
get better jobs, but like we need the systems in place to cushion it, which means we believe this is real.
Hello and welcome to Why Is This Happening with me, your host, Chris Hayes. Well, we're here for another special edition of our AI series with Pod the AI Endgame. And today I want to sort of focus on not the neither the best case scenario nor the worst case scenario, but a trajectory in which these things really are incredibly powerful and transformational. Like that in which the kind of more maximalist claims of its backers basically come true, short of they end all human life on the planet, which we can sort of put in another category. But what does it look like if the people saying this technology is completely revolutionary on a scale, maybe even more revolutionary, the internet, maybe the most revolutionary form of automation that's ever happened, the most revolutionary form of automation? Like, what exactly does that mean if that's true? My guest today is a professor at Wharton, Ethan Mollick. He's been studying AI and its implications for education, entrepreneurship, work. He's author of numerous books, including a 2024 New York Times bestseller called Co-Intelligence: Living and Working with AI. And he has a new book coming out in the fall called Coexistence, about working with AIs that are, as he says, sometimes smarter than you. He also writes a Substack called One Useful Thing. Professor, it's great to have you on the program.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So how long have you been working with and working on AI?
So, I mean, that's always a hard question because AI has meant many different things. But when I was in graduate school at MIT, I was did work at the MIT Media Lab with the AI group at that point. Some of the fathers of AI they're from the original days of the 1950s. And I was the non-technical person. So I was like the business person translating stuff. And then I've used AI a lot for teaching and educational purposes. And certainly since large language models came out, I've been talking a lot about them and how they impact work and education and everything else.
So where are you on the kind of scale of 1 to 10 of 1 being it's a complete con or or a bubble that's going to completely fail, and 10 being it will change the world unlike any other technology we've ever had?
So, I mean, one thing I'll just try and be careful about without being boring is that there is a little bit of like changing the world is absolutely definite in a huge way. So maybe 8 or 9 in the longer
Okay.
term,
Yeah.
but that this is not an instantaneous process, right? It's not like there is a process of adapting to technology, and that change takes place over time, not instantly.
You know, say a little bit more about that, because one of the examples I think we've had is even if you just talk about the internet or you talk about other forms of digital revolutions, there used to be a joke about like the paperless office. I remember being made in the 1990s where you were still printing out a ton of stuff and people were like talking about like joking about the paperless office as you like went to the printer and printed out 90 pages. And it was because there was a huge gap between what the frontier prediction was for what, wired networking computing would do to, say, a workplace and what actually happened in real time. Now in the year 2026, there's really not a lot of printing happening. Like every time you have to use a printer is really a bummer in your life. It turned out that prediction was true. It just took like 2 decades longer than some people thought. Do you think that's something similar happening here?
So I think it is, right? I mean, again, there's sort of this weird needle to thread because a lot of, especially online discussion is either 0 or 1. Like either this is all fake, which it just clearly is not, or, or the machine god is coming next week, right? And I mean, can't 100% rule that out, but that's the most likely scenario is this looks like some aspects of it look like other technologies. And if you work at any organization, you've probably seen this, right? No company transformed radically as a result of AI in 2025. Because to do that, let's say your programmers are 100 times more productive. So how are they getting instructions about what to build? Who's testing this? Who's shipping that product? How are you evaluating their work? What are they supposed to do with their time? even if they're using the product, there's a whole bunch of other systems that have to be connected together to make AI work. So we call this diffusion of technology, which in the in the academic world, and it's just a constant. All technologies take some effort, some time to diffuse. So nothing happens instantly. That said, diffusion's happening very quickly here, but nothing's instantaneous.
What are good analogies for that diffusion?
So it turns out, by the way, the diffusion is the single best prediction in all of social science. Basically, every diffusion curve looks the same. It's called an S curve. It starts slow, takes off, and then slows down when it reaches saturation. So literally every technology in human history follows this path. But if you want to take the example of the internet, right? 1990s, everyone's really excited about the internet. There wasn't web pages yet, so it took the invention of the web page and HTTP, and then we needed to have commerce, and the speeds of the internet need to be faster. Companies need to put web pages up, and ad agencies need to figure out how to advertise on them. So there's lots of pieces that had to come together to make the internet a place where you could do business, right? And so some people adopted really quickly, and some of them won out early, Amazon. Some of them didn't, Pets.com, right? Even though they turned out to be right in the long term. So there's a timing issue and a adjustment issue that happens anywhere. And those adjustments are where all of the heavy stuff happens, right? Whether this helps jobs or hurts jobs, it's all about how we use these technologies.
So you don't think there's like an innate valence to the technology in terms of, say, its job impact?
So, again, we're now in the world's most complicated area of academic debate, but there is some valence, right? Because there's this law of technology that technologies are neither good nor bad, nor are they neutral, which means that it's not inherently good or bad, but it doesn't mean it doesn't have valence, as you said, right? There is a valence, right? But that valence also is partially based on where we are as an economy. What do we think of when we use technology? We use it for automation. So the valence becomes an automation one, right? Use this to replace human labor. But it doesn't have to be that way. This could be augmentation. How do we make everybody's jobs better and smarter and work better and do more stuff? Those are choices that are made on the implementation edge, not in the technology itself. But we're coming into a world where the goal is automation. That would be an anxiety.
If diffusion is irregular across industries, right, or across different parts of the business world, where's a place that looks the most cutting edge where this is, it seems like software and coding is the place where we're, really seeing it picked up at a crazy scale, unlike anything in, my working world or the other people I know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so that's where you're seeing the weirdest experimentation. So you can kind of think of AI broadly as having a couple eras. There was sort of pre-large language model AI, and a lot of people who are critics of AI, and there's lots to criticize, sort of conflate that era of algorithmic decision making where we had a lot of big data and we'd use that big data to analyze things, and Netflix would tell you what movie to watch, or we could figure out pricing. Still very important businesses, but that style. Then there was this sort of period of time where it was this co-intelligence, to take the name from my book, where you'd work back and forth with AI systems. What's happened in the last couple of months has been a move towards agentic systems. You assign work to AI, it does it itself. And that's where this big change to coding has happened. Because if you're a computer programmer, a lot of them have stopped touching code. They will just assign work to the AI and then confirm that work exists or not. And then the AI does all the work for them. And, as the systems get better, they do more and more work with less and less errors and less. And that's where we're seeing the most transformation. There are some companies that have been experimenting with models where coders do not touch code at all. The AI develops the code, it tests the code, and all they do is give it a thumbs up or thumbs down to ship it.
Can you talk a little bit more about the development of these agentic systems and what the kind of friction points are, what the challenges are, and how quickly they seem to be overcoming them? Like, it sounds to me insane, right? And I've read the stories too of the people that only they have 16 agents working overnight, churning out code, and then they're trying to get agents to supervise other agents. I don't actually quite understand it. So how should we understand this sort of agentic paradigm for the people that aren't actually dealing with it, or are still just asking Claude a question?
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so you could think about the way you ask Claude a question right now, and there's a billion people around the world who do. I was just speaking to some Amish people who use AI frequently to just tell you how fast the adoption's happening.
That clears the bar. They're allowed to.
That clears. There are debates in the Amish community. I feel like we're on the edge of 17 different academic discussions that we could have separately. But I think when we think about this, right? If you used AI before, you went back and forth on a chatbot. So you'd go to ChatGPT, you'd ask a question, it would give you an answer. You give us a question. What an agent is basically those same chatbots, but they're now hooked up to what are called harnesses, which are sets of tools they could use. So they can take over your computer, they can browse the web, they can write code. And now when you give them an instruction, what they can do is just figure out how to solve it themselves. So if I say, hey, create me a business idea and launch it, it can work for 8 hours independently and write the code for the website and do the research. And, it may not be a good business idea, but it could do all of the pieces that you might need to make that happen. So agents are autonomous tools. They can go off and do work on their own, and make judgment calls about how the work gets done and then return to you the final product.
How well do you think that's working?
So it was absolutely not working well a year ago. And it was working kind of okay in a few areas like research 6 months ago. And now it's working extremely well in a lot of areas like code. Like they're not good at everything, right? Like there's my first academic paper on AI, we came up with this idea of the jagged frontier. The AI is good at some stuff, bad at some stuff. It's not good at everything. But at things like code, it is reasonable to expect multiple hours of independent work. There's a great study. OpenAI did it, but it's been other people have observed it also, and their data is open, called GDP-Val, where they brought in experts representing 5% of the U.S. economy, average of 14 years of experience, and they had them each create a task. And those tasks then they had other experts they hired to do the task, 7 hours each task. They had the AI also do the task, took them a few minutes. They had a third set of people spend an hour judging each answer and deciding which was better, not knowing who wrote them. When this came out last year, the best AI agents were tying or beating humans 48% of the time across these tasks, which is already pretty impressive. The models that just came out a couple days ago are up to 84% of the time, right? So if you assign them a task that a human would do, 84% of the time, they tie or beat the human doing this.
Can you give me an example of a kind of task? Like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, I mean, so one example of this would be, okay, financial services. I have a client who is considering these 3 different kinds of IRA packages. This is their income. Here's what's going on in this city. I want you to create a presentation and a PDF laying out the implications of each of these 3 approaches, taking into account here's who their kids are and everything else, and then talk about which one you'd advise giving the legal situation for. Or it might be another one might be we are a maker of electric cars. I need a marketing plan for our Dallas office. Here's a whole bunch of their sales information. We need PowerPoints and we need images for an ad. And then I'd like you to figure out how much it would cost to test these in the market.
I mean, that's like work product, right? I mean, that's the kind of thing that people go to punch into the office and do every day.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that is the goal of this thing, right? It's called GDP-Val for a reason. The goal is to find economically valuable work. And I think what's snuck up on people with agentic stuff is it's gone from AI as productivity booster alone, which is you use it and you get answers and you do a bit better in your job. And we have all these papers showing that this is what happens, right? You get productivity gains. And those productivity gains are generally captured by workers at this stage, by the way, which is kind of an interesting point because you're doing the work, you decide how much of that to pass on to agentic work where it starts to actually do economically valuable tasks. And now we've got to figure out how people relate to that.
How are they going to relate to that? I mean, it seems to me like the way they relate to it is you fire the people that used to do this and you tell a machine to do it.
So, I mean, that is going back to what we said before, the unimaginative way of doing that. I mean, there's a few problems with that. One is the AI is still jagged. So it's good at some stuff, bad at some stuff. And humans do matter in the decision-making process across a lot of this kind of work. A second thing is if every company is run by Claude, right, there's no real strategic advantage in how you do business because everyone's business is Claude business. And like, where's the advantage of the human piece?
That is such a good point. Right. I mean, it does seem, wait, let me stop you there because one of the things that seems to me, I've heard people describe the future, even Sam Altman and AI have described it as a utility. Like we think intelligence will be utility, like, water, electricity, and we charge people for it. And I thought it was such an interesting idea. I've also heard Bezos describe intelligence in this era like electricity. Like it's a layer on everything. It doesn't, there's no like electricity industry in my life. It's just that everything's electric. Like everything I use, it plugs into the grid. And I light a few candles here and there, but other than that, like mostly everything's electric, right? What's strange about that is like, if that's the case, then it doesn't seem like you're creating a world with a bunch of different AI companies. I mean, utilities are just, they're regulated that produce a commodity product, right? The power that flows through the grid. It's no one's like sitting down and be like, what am I going to do? Which of my which energy company am I going to choose here? And that's partly because of regulation, but also because there's a kind of natural monopoly effect. What you just said sort of sparks that thought in me, right? Which is like, it does seem like strange that we're going to have a bunch of these different models. It seems like there'll be one, or it will all kind of converge in some way, and I'm not quite sure what that will mean for like who that is that's making the models.
So, all right. So there's the sort of elephant in the room here, which is the ultimate question is how good do these models get, how fast, right? So the AI companies, right, have sort of this two-handed thing, which is on one hand, they're making intelligence on demand, and let's call it intelligence of a sort, right? It's intelligence in quotes. Like it substitutes for human intelligence under some circumstances, not in others. Sort of like electricity can be used to substitute for some kinds of human work, but not others. So
Yeah.
we have a bad definition of what AI intelligence is, but it is intelligence of a sort on tap, right? And part of the issue also is smarter generally is better at everything, right? So a smarter model does better. So right now there's, 3 to 5 US companies that produce very smart they're in the race for very smart models, and another 5 or so Chinese companies that are about 6 or 8 months behind, and all kind of racing. And then the question is, what are they racing for? And there's really 2 kinds of outcomes here, or 3. One of them is that eventually the growth in AI ability slows down and this becomes a commodity. And then the question becomes, who has the best? Like if you are an AI company, maybe you have some advantage because you control the models, so you can make them work better with your particular software and you still sell more of it because it's not just electricity on tap. I'm not just using the AI, but I'm using Claude Code, and Claude Code has special value associated with it. So, but then there's a commodity question. The second option is that there's some sort of specialization that happens as ability goes off. So some are better at math. That hasn't happened yet, maybe. And then the third is what the AI labs secretly are aiming for, which is takeoff. They think that they can achieve a general intelligence, a machine smarter than human at every intellectual task in the next couple of years. And they think after that comes superintelligence. And if you're the first person to superintelligence, you get all the marbles because it's a self-accelerating process. They call this recursive self-improvement, the idea that the AI helps make better AIs. So now they're racing. It's like the electricity companies were all racing to create, the electric god, whoever builds the most electricity fastest then controls all electricity in the universe forever. So that is underlying this, and that's their theory, right? And that's the thing people find most incredulous, and I think it's worth some worrying about or thinking about because it's not impossible, right, to imagine a situation like that. But otherwise, commoditization, is a possibility, right? It's just a question of, does this curve slow down? Because otherwise, you don't want to use a year-old model when you could use a more advanced model today.
Okay, but let's stay on this superintelligence idea or takeoff idea, because to me, that's the difference between what we might call a normal technology and something abnormal. Like if we're talking about something like electricity, which again, absolutely revolutionary. I mean, in almost incomprehensibly broad ways.
Right.
But the internet, electricity, they're still, quote, normal technologies, right? It doesn't sound to me like the story that they're telling investors about superintelligence is normal in that sense. Right? Like they think there's some rupture here, some break, some difference in kind, not degree. Can you just walk through that story? I have a hard time with it because I think the people that are selling it the most have a vested interest. They have billions of dollars at stake in selling it. It also makes me kind of panic if I think they're right. So I just have a hard time orienting myself to it. But in a clear-eyed way from someone who studies this in the business world, like, what do you think of that theory? Can you just push at it a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, nobody has clear answers here, right? And like, this is the idea that eats people, I think was phrased at one point. Like, as soon as you start worrying about superintelligence, there's nothing else worth talking about, right? Because this is, the apocalypse or savior of humanity or whatever else it is. I would say one of the problems I often see for people sort of dismissing AI stuff is they assume that everything these AI leaders say is all marketing. And there is definitely some marketing. Like, you want to take things with a grain of salt, but there is sincerity there that has been there since the very beginning, that they genuinely believe that this is what they are supposed to do. This is what they want to do. When you talk to people privately in the AI labs, this is what they're building towards.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
but that's true. I don't think it's I mean, that's also true of cult leaders. You know what I mean? Like people could be deluded and also sincere.
Yes. And by the way, and the fact that large language models turned out to be so good at so many things is a shock to everybody involved in this, right? And we still don't have we know how large language models work, but we don't have great theories yet about why, we have some ideas, but why they're as good as they are, right? So we're also in this unusually powerful technology, and so far there's been no barriers. There's all the predictions of slowdowns last year. GPT-5 is a disappointment. It wasn't. Like, everything turned out to be like, they have been much more right than people saying that they're not right, right? So I think jaggedness is something that's not going away. Like, for example, one of the things I like to have models do, I'm a writer, is like I actually have the AIs write long fiction. Long fiction, they've gotten, like, math used to be a huge problem in AI development. And now the AIs are among the best mathematicians on the planet and will soon be better than anyone else, right? We made fun of how they could do math before, now they do math. Writing has been a weirdly jagged space. If you ask the AI to write something, it's going to be overwrought. Even the most recent models still have their, all of their little tricks. It's not X, it's Y. They have like overwrought plot lines. They don't land story arcs well. Every character sounds the same. They're all named Lara Voss. And like all of that stuff is so there are jaggedness. So when you think about it, a AGI or an ASI, I think a jagged one also that has to deal with human kinds of adoption and where those jaggednesses meet human systems, means that we don't have quite the machine god in a room. Now, we might have something that's generating new drugs that save lives, or something that generates new weapons, or something similar, and the human layer and organizational around it layer looks very different than it does today. But it's hard for me to imagine but this is what they're aiming for. But there is reason to expect that we will both hit huge growth, but there will also be weird jaggedness to these systems in kind of the way there are now, at least for the foreseeable future. So what all that means is, I think that this is a big deal. I think that we should expect there's no sign of these models slowing down in what they're good at. And that means things like cybersecurity are going to be a huge mess, and things are going to change very rapidly in software development and other areas. AIs are good, but it may not be the quite transformational piece to every aspect of humanity from a superintelligence that people would expect.
But let's stay on that the superintelligence part of it. Altman will do the joke of like the idea is that we build AGI, artificial generalized intelligence, and we ask the AGI how to make money. He's got a line like that. That talk a little bit about the idea of recursive self-improvement and what would be the implications if they're right about that?
I mean, we're already seeing some recursive self-improvement, right? So recursive self-improvement is the idea that an AI can help you build the next generation of AI. We're seeing that. I mean, all the labs are, at least Google, Anthropic, and OpenAI, which are probably the three leaders at this point, somewhat definitively, all are reporting some degree of the AIs helping us make the next version. But again, jaggedness gets in the way. They help you with some areas, but you still need to do something, there's something that they're not good at, or they don't get, or that they fall into a rut about, and humans need their intuition or help or support, or you just need a document carried from point A to point B, or whatever it is. There are all these barriers. But recursive self-improvement is about, you start to see the speed up, and we're seeing it, right? Where there's no sign of the exponential development ability of AI in the areas it's good at slowing down at this point. Like, it's just not. The critics will keep saying it's about to slow down. It just hasn't happened. It might happen. There's no reason to expect it could happen, but it hasn't. And part of the reason is they keep solving problems this way. And you can see this, by the way, in the amount of software code these companies are sort of shipping. So if you've played with Claude Code or Claude Cowork, those are shipping major product developments like every day now because they're using the tools to build the tools. So that's what recursive self-improvement looks like, is using the thing to build the thing. Right.
And again, to the point of your about sincerity, it's also the case that like they're using all this stuff to make their stuff. So they believe in it.
They absolutely believe in it. And like, it is really this, and I totally understand after crypto and Web3 that everyone is very skeptical about technologists telling, but the old school view of technologists was they were very sincere. They weren't always right, but they were very sincere. I think these people are quite sincere. That doesn't mean they're right.
So let's say it doesn't, the superintelligence question in some ways is a little too hard to even think of what the world is like. But something that is just short of that, which is like, the thing you said about they're, better at most human tasks. So let's say they get, let's say their fiction writing gets incredibly good. Or their nonfiction writing, which I don't love. I like to do that myself. Or, they're already pretty good at like financial analysis. They can churn out decks for sure. They can take big spreadsheets and turn them into legible numbers. They can find trends. They can say this is, okay, so then what, I think, becomes the question, like for on two levels, for businesses and for workers. First, with businesses, one of the things that's strange to me is that you've got the diffusion thing and you're also running after this moving train. So it's both hard to put systems in place, which takes time, but also the thing that you're putting in place is changing in terms of what its capabilities so much that it's just, for me, like you can't for a very long time, you couldn't even let this into a newsroom because it made mistakes, it hallucinated, and it had no like traceability of what it was finding, right? So it's just it's not just useless, it's worse than useless, right? It's dangerous. Right. It could tell you a fact with certainty it's false. Now it has at least traceability. You can say, you can ask it a question, say, show me links, and then and then you yourself can at least check the work, right? So that's an important improvement. You know, presumably an agentic system will you could actually like learn to trust it to go check the links, and like you could even have some agentic fact checker, right? I mean, you could start to build out the things that humans used to do. Again, I don't like to think this way, and I would be skeptical, and like my guard would be very high. But conceptually, I could imagine automating some of the work that we do. But also, because it's changing so rapidly, it just becomes very hard to think about how you'd even start doing that.
I mean, you're right. So part of this is that's a huge problem, right? Like the pace of change. I mean, a thing I think people don't realize is nobody knows anything right now. Like I'm as close to this as the coal face, as we'd say, as anything. Anybody out there, I talk to, I've talked to everyone from like Chairman Powell to the leaders of all the AI companies, like I mean, CEOs of companies. Nobody really has a handle on including the AI companies. Like they have a technique that builds better intelligence, right? With the quotes around it, and it just keeps working, right? And so like there's not like products are lagging behind, methods are lagging behind. There is so much more. Like if AI development stopped today, we'd have 5 to 10 years of a complete change in the economy as we figure out how to normalize this and use this, right? And and you could see this in companies that started 2 years ago have very narrow systems that are mostly like, let's talk to every Chris Hayes podcast. Like that's what they would build. And like, it was really cool. You could never do that before. But now now, as you said, automated fact checking is not only possible, but the AI is often better at doing that than humans are, right? You throw a chapter of a book in, and when I was working a book, I threw a chapter in, check every reference here. It would find things I was like, oh, you're right. I probably had the nuance wrong in this. At one point it was like,
wait, you've done this. You've done this.
Oh yes. Yeah. When working on my latest book, one fun thing is
walk me through this. Because this to me is like as concrete as it gets in terms of my work life, right?
Great. Okay. So GPT 5.5 Pro is the best model for using this right now, or you can use Codex or Code. But like I would take each chapter, like I write every chapter myself, right? Like, cause I'm human, right? But it gets harder because the writing gets better. And like you ask for advice, it's like, ooh, that is a good sentence. But that's a crisis that I'm dealing with on a constant basis because I can see the change happen, right? It went from like parody of your writing to like every so often you're like, help me end this sentence. It's like, that is really good. And every so often I use one of those, and that's like the line in something is like, you really nailed that. I'm like, oh crap, that was the one line that the AI helped me write in this whole thing. But anyway, leaving that aside, so I took a chapter, for example, from my new book that's going to come out in October, and I threw it at GPT-5, and I did all the research myself, right? I posted research on Twitter, and just as one fun thing, it pointed out a few like issues of like, well, the math doesn't like this reference that you're using, like that I disagree with some of the math. But one of my favorite bits was I told the story from that I researched and read the article myself, found the article myself about about funeral directors talking about AI eulogies. And what the AI reported back to me was it said, actually, the conference that you're talking about in 2023 or whatever was in Las Vegas, not in Newark. And it turned out it was right, and the article was wrong, right? And
so the article you've taken it from got it wrong.
Yes, the article got the year and place.
So it searched the internet to see where the conference announcement was.
It found it actually pointed it out to me, right? Yeah. And there were other examples like that too. Like
that's what you want. I mean, that's when we talk about like when you're talking about the GDP val or whatever. Like again, I have a very weird work life for the last 20 years in this world, but like that's something for me that I really get, right? Like that's good fact checking. The fact checker did a great job there. Thank you, fact checker. And that's something inconceivable to automate literally 6 months ago.
That's exactly right. And like that bit is like, and by the way, my latest version just for fun was I used Dispatch, which is a version for my phone, and asked my home computer, I was like, could you read over my book for me? and give me notes on each chapter, right? And like fact check every piece of it, and then put that together into a Word. And I came up to a Word document with it. And a couple of the issues were issues that were genuine issues. I just a couple where I'm like, it's being too pedantic, which is always the issue with a fact checker. You're like, you're actually right. I shouldn't have multiplied it this way, but like it's too hard for like there's one piece every time I feed fact checking, like OpenAI gets really mad at me because it's like you're missing the nuance here. I'm like, they don't care about the flop calculations on an IBM Series 360, and I understand that you're saying
Right.
1955, but it's a 1957 model, but like
No,
that
that's a
is
very
furious of me.
human, right?
Yeah.
That's like a real fact checker,
Yeah.
almost doing too much. Where you're like, it's fine. That is
Right, like nobody
Yeah.
cares, I
Yeah,
promise.
right.
And like
Yeah.
I'm not saying it doesn't miss things, right? Like I actually have found I actually use 3 different models to fact check everything and look at them myself, and that's my human judgment about what to use and what not to. But that, as you said, was inconceivable. I would have expected completely made up stuff. Now, I still paid a human to go through everything and do the checking for me. Like I
Yep.
did the things I'm supposed to do, but like the human spent a lot less hours this time than my last book. And it's a
Right,
big it's a big difference.
Yeah, so that's a great example, right? That's a real productivity gain. That's just one little world, right? And,
Yes.
and I think the other thing I think about is right. So, but that's again, it's going so fast. There's also the other dimension of this. I want to get to workers too. There's businesses. Then there's just like there's certain obvious use cases for this agentic stuff. Like my favorite is if you have young children, okay, and you exist in a place where whether it's daycare or it's classes, a lot of parents I think have gone through the thing where like you have to the registration for like the jazz class it opens at 12:01. So you got to stay up and you got to register your kid like right away, or summer camp. There's a whole bunch of stuff like this. There's all kinds of things, make doctor's appointments. There's all sorts of things you're managing in a household that would be amazing to delegate, right? And there's no, this is not a labor force. I mean, often this is because of the dynamics of American patriarchy and gender. Often it's moms who have to do this or don't have to do it, but end up doing it. But, there's a million things like that just in household life, right? That would be super useful to be able to outsource, where you're not like, again, you're not taking anyone's job away and, but would probably be a life improvement.
Yes. I mean, and by the way, so you can pull that off just barely right now, right? Like, but which means, by the way, in 6 months,
that
everyone
was
will pull
my
it
question.
off.
Like,
Yeah, you could pull it off by using the right combination of like OpenClaw, which is like an open source AI agent, and some of the scheduling features. It's all it's tenuous, right? Like I've done this. Like I've had the systems do this. Although, funnily enough, I tried to get them to fill out a regular file I have to fill out for the University of Pennsylvania, and it wasn't that it couldn't do the system. It said, I feel unethical doing this because this is certification from you that you're agreeing to do this, whatever
Really?
the minor thing was.
It dinged
and so
you?
Claude refused
Are
to
you
do the work
serious?
to help me. Yes. So which I thought was pretty funny.
It is funny and also very on brand for like their whole thing is like, we have the most developed superego of all the models.
It's like, come on, please, just really. I have to start bribing under the table now. Although we actually, as a paper, bribing doesn't work, unfortunately. But in any case, I think I would say by the time this airs in a month or two, it's going to be much easier by the end of, 6 months, like, because it already works. Like I know people doing this with all of their family work, or I know people who have 2 versions of Claude, one for the husband, one for the wife, and they actually negotiate with each other about stuff to do and like have access. But like
It's a little
that's
dystopian.
It's
to be
messy.
clear.
Well, or cute, maybe, I don't know. But like the point is, it is messy right now, but that is 100% in the realm of doable, right? Like, but then there's harder problems. Like travel planning turns out to be harder than filling out forms. But
Travel planning is
syncing with
really
your
hard.
account,
Yes.
yeah. And people keep going to that one for some reason, which is like one of the more annoying ones because of so I would say that kind of work is definitely 2026 is not going to be a problem by the end of because I've already done that, and I've done that by shoestringing stuff together. If you want to make a weekend project of a tool that looks at your Google Calendar and signs your kid up for stuff and pre-writes your email, like that's all doable right now. It's not a hard problem.
There's one aspect of that is that there's a huge cybersecurity and trust question, right? And this is where, OpenClaw you mentioned was this, is this program that sort of allows people at the kind of bleeding edge of AI use to kind of, say to a computer, you have at it. You got everything in here and use my computer like you or me, and they can do all kinds of stuff with that, and that opens up all sort of security issues. So there's like that to me, this question of getting to the place where it's super useful requires trust. I mean, this is really what I keep coming back to. Like, I got to trust the fact checker, or if you have someone booking travel for you, you have to trust that person, right? And I mean, obviously there's ways you verify, you see the confirmation email, but here's my social security number, here's my passport photo, here's my credit card. So it just seems like there's a huge amount of personal data and interaction between systems and trust that has to exist to get to the point where it truly is doing the kind of thing a human could do.
So there are a few things there. I mean, one, you're right. I mean, everything is lagging, right? The models are smarter, in quotes again, than we have uses for them to be smarter about, right? So like don't have the whole infrastructure around them. Like, how do agents talk to each other? What are they allowed to do? Amazon still blocks your shopping agent from going to the website, right? I've actually had Claude, just one other fun little thing for my book. I asked Claude to go and buy something to delight me based on it has access to my email, right? I've trusted enough to do that, and I give it access to a credit card. I'm like, check all my stuff, but like I know what the model can do and can't do. It bought me a very nice art book, actually, on Piranesi, which I had mentioned before in a couple of tweet posts. So it was very nice to get that. My money. It would be nicer if it was Claude money.
Okay, but then here comes a really interesting part to me, right? We're talking about, like, you talk about these self-contained tasks, okay? Work is coordination. Work is people doing stuff together. And people doing stuff together isn't just coordination, it's conflict. And it's solving conflict, dissolving conflict, or routing around conflict. Or so much of what work is people interacting with each other. And so then if you take a step forward on this, if we're sort of on the agent line, right, which is like the agent's going to go do these things, the agent's going to be out there and it's going to be hitting either other humans it has to do stuff with, other automated systems, or other agents. Now we got to figure out some ways that all of the stuff it's why we have meetings. It's why we have committees, right? Like all of these things have been built up over time, not just in the workplace, but in, social structures and institutional structures, which are ways of coordinating activity between groups of people. Like, how does the AI do that?
That is the $1 trillion plus kind of question. Like, I mean, there's a bunch of technical ways to do it. I mean, there's like 15 ways to get at your question, right? Like one of them is the way we organize work today is the same way it was the org chart, which was invented in 1855, right? To organize how railroads operate. We keep doing this. Like we still teach in business school, it works today.
That's the origin. Right? You still teach
the origin, right? First time, you live in one, right? Everybody does. Like if you work in an organization, because we had to organize work for the first time in real time across complex organizations with the telegraph. So we still use that. We still use the assembly lines that Henry Ford invented. Time clocks were Henry Ford's invention. We still use agile software development from 2002 because they were built around human limits and human abilities. So we need new methods. And there are companies experimenting with some really crazy approaches to how you reorganize work with AI. Happy to talk about some of those. There's fascinating attempts to do this. But this interaction, this is going back to the first question you asked. Why is diffusion going to be slow? Because it's going to hit systems so one option is the AI just pretends to be you. Right. And you have a lot of permissions in the world. Right. You can sign up. The soccer company assumes that you're signing up your kid for soccer. If the AI has your email and your permissions, it could do many things in the world
on the internet.
Right. Yeah. Because people don't have to do it. But as we start to get into process, and by the way, conflict's important. Right. If the AI just produces output, but there's no conflict of views, that's bad as well.
Right.
So
no, that's what I'm saying. Like conflict is actually like part of the generative friction of collective human endeavor.
Yes. And so that is one of the things I emphasize to people a lot is like when the output of your work is a PowerPoint and the PowerPoint is the only goal, there is a decent chance that AI may be able to produce that PowerPoint.
Right.
If the goal was the PowerPoint to go into a meeting so marketing people would yell at legal people and then the person who was doing the interviews would say, actually, I spoke to the people and you kind of are wrong about that. If that is, and the client has this view and there's a legal, that is harder to replace, right? And that's another reason why I don't think that the absolute destruction transformation of the economy happens the way people think it does, because there are bottlenecks everywhere, right? And we place high value on people who solve bottlenecks. The jobs of lawyers is mostly bottlenecking and solving bottlenecks. So what the bottlenecks we have will change, right? Software development bottleneck used to be writing as much code as you could. Right? Now it's being a good manager of software. So now the value is going to flow from coding being the high value thing to managing software being a high value thing. So I think we're going to see a ping pong effect throughout the economy as AI gets good at something, the bottleneck's going to change, right, to different human tasks, and that's going to change what kind of jobs we value.
Let's talk a little bit about teachers and students, because that's another place, right? So there's businesses implementing. I'm going to get to workers in a second. There's people just in their outside their work life, and then there's teachers and students. You know, this is a place where I think a lot of people have a lot of concern. I do. I mean, I really don't think it's great if the next generation of people don't learn how to write.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think writing is thinking, and I think argumentation is, is a way that a person develops their critical faculties. I think people are going to get. I think if it becomes the case that everyone just goes to the AI to do their schoolwork in four-year undergraduate institutions, which I think is almost certainly going to be is the almost inexorable force that we're driving towards, absent an intervention. It's just obviously going to be the case that a bunch of 19-year-olds, right, again, who increasingly will have been raised on this through their entire life, right, are going to go to the AI. What are the interventions you think are necessary there to get something useful out of the technology without essentially truly destroying the minds of all future generations?
Yeah, great topic. I mean, and I should say, educator myself, I've been building educational tools, releasing them for free for long before AI came out. So I think about this a lot. I mean, honestly, so I predicted something right after ChatGPT called the homework apocalypse, which turned out to be true. Like all homework becomes invaluable, but it's actually not that hard a problem to solve, right? Classrooms are actually the easiest place to solve this problem because we've already solved it before. In the 1970s, we had got calculators, and we made choices as collectively, and teachers did, and curriculum designers did, parents. It was a multi-effort about what we want to keep and what we don't want to keep about doing math by hand, right? And we do different. Like you still have to learn math by hand, and how do we enforce that? You are in a classroom and you take a test, and we can watch you take a test,
Yep.
and we know whether you can do this by hand. And now we can teach things we couldn't teach before, right?
And also,
Yeah.
parents. I have a second grader, right? It's both that, and it's also that we've all bought into this norm, right? So you could give your second grader a calculator to do their homework,
Well,
but
then
parents don't do that because
when they do the test,
Right.
they won't do. You can't
Right.
give them the calculator
Right.
because
I guess that's right, yes.
I control where they are in the classroom.
Right.
I control their grades, right, as a second
Right.
grade teacher, and it's easy enough to assessment is not that
Right.
hard in a sealed classroom setting.
Right.
I can test you. Tests suck, but they turn out to be really useful educationally. It turns out frequent testing is actually one of the few interventions in education that makes a huge difference. It's nobody likes it, right?
Right.
But that works. So I can control, I have to decide what I'm teaching, right? I can have you write essays in class. So there's this concept in education called the flipped classroom that we've known for a long time has big advantages. The flipped classroom is the idea that you do your learning outside of class and your activities and active learning inside of class, of class. So
as opposed to a lecture, as opposed to going to school, getting a lecture, coming home and do homework,
Yes.
you go home and maybe watch, you watch some module, and then you come in and you're actually doing the work there with the teacher and other people.
And examples are on the board, or it doesn't
Right.
have to all be math work, right? We're doing a role play simulation where you're George Washington, and we are doing we're going to write short stories. It can be many kinds of case study and many kinds of things. And that has been educationally advantageous for a long time. Sage on a stage where you talk and people go home. And by the way, lots of your classes are doing this. If you have kids in middle school, there's almost certainly going to be a class soon where they're watching Khan Academy videos and then doing math problems in class, right? The worst version of this. So to me, one natural thing is we actually know AI tutors. Very bad if people just use AI to answer questions because the AI is designed to be a helpful assistant. It will tell you the answers. Even if your kid is trying to learn, they'll think they learn because learning requires friction. It's annoying. There's nothing, you can't learn without effort, and effort sucks. We try and short circuit it. So if you just ask, how do I solve this math problem? You will think you learn and you didn't learn. And we know this, there's controlled studies. However, if the AI acts like a tutor, if it doesn't give you the answer, if it quizzes you on the questions, if it personalizes to you, there are a bunch of studies showing exactly what you'd expect to find, which is large educational gains. Because when I'm in a classroom lecturing to everybody, I'm not lecturing to the most advanced student, I'm just lecturing to everybody, right? Even in a class of 20 people, I can't personally communicate with them. AI can be a personalized tutor.
Right.
That's not an instantaneous thing. It's not magic. It doesn't happen without effort to do. But to me, the education problem is one of the more solvable problems because I control people in a classroom setting. I can
Right.
evaluate their ability, and I can build tools that they have to use outside of class that are actually good for them as opposed to all the junk ed tech out there.
So two thoughts on that. One is I've had experiences. One place that I found AI as a technology really useful and sometimes even thrilling is if there's something I'm trying to figure out, some new area of knowledge, like quantum computing the other day was in the news. And I read a few articles and then I went to Claude. I was like, all right, let's assume I'm like a pretty bright undergraduate with, I'm not a physics major, not a computer science major, but I really want to understand quantum computing. And a series of iterative questions, right? Like, okay, well, what about this? So why does this do that? What's the implication for cryptography, et cetera? I kind of get there's this third positionality. It sort of dissolves the binary, but like, how does that actually relate to the physics? I don't actually understand, like physically, how's it building the thing? And after 20, 25, 30 minutes of going back and forth, like I did really feel like I had by the way, I had read the Wikipedia entry on quantum computing. I had read a bunch of articles. I was motivated to and do I understand quantum computing now? Not really. But I got a little closer with it. And it did feel like that really thrilling feeling I had in 1995 when I would start to search on the internet, where it's like, oh, here's a thing I just want to know about. And so that does feel great. The write my paper for me feels the opposite of great. And the one thing that I would say about the asterisk about the controlled environment, again, I'm obsessed with this because this is my craft, right? This is my life's vocation, which is long form writing. The research paper is a tough one to simulate. So that seems to me like a real unsolved problem because you can write in class essays and you can, but research papers are actually a hugely important part of my education. I think generally education, and that one seems like a tough one to crack.
I mean, there are losses, right? Like there's no teacher asks for all of our homework assignments and 100 years of teaching pedagogy to be thrown out the window. Yes. And by the way, OpenAI didn't know they were doing it either. Not that this is a defense of releasing whatever, but I mean, I think that's right. There are we are taking a hit. Like now, on the other hand, by the way, pedagogically, we don't actually know much what happens in a long form essay writing. Like a lot of us professors assign them. We don't actually hopefully it's like you and me, but you and I are writers. So we thought writing is thinking. That's not true for everybody, right? So there is a little bit of kind of privileging our angle of
fair.
My breakthrough 100-page paper and other people can't. Most people are not literate enough to write those, but I think you're right. Like there are things, and by the way, there's more profound questions. What do we teach? What do we not teach? How do we think about? But I think that the idea of learning basic skills, and we know how to teach them, and I think AI will be helpful to them while being destructive in other cases, because we have enough evidence for that. But I also agree with you that there are losses of stuff, that there are things that we used to do. I mean, it's funny because one of the things you're talking about is like intrinsic learning, right? Like you're intrinsically curious, you want to learn something, you go out and learn on the internet. I think a lot of us who were in the early days of AI and internet education thought, oh my God, Wikipedia, education is going to be transformed. Now everyone has access to all the information in the world. Ignorance will be defeated. And of course, that looks so stupid now, but in the late 90s, early 2000s, this was a real thing we believed, right?
No,
we learned how complicated it is afterwards.
Yes, and it did. I mean, and it did transform people's knowledge of the world for sure. I mean, it didn't make people more informed. I said on average, but it was transformative. But yes, it didn't. It didn't sort of solve at scale for a whole bunch of reasons.
And so I think we got overly nervous about technology, and for a lot of reasons. There's polarization around technology, but. Look, the early data from studies in Taiwan, and by good econometricians, right? Like this is not like this sort of messy case study. Studies in Taiwan and in Kenya and at Harvard and Stanford. Like AI tutors seem to make a very large impact. I mean, large in an educational research setting, which is a third of a standard deviation, which is a grade or so, which is huge still. But they do seem to matter, and they could make learning more interesting. They could tailor it to more people. We're seeing less. Less demographic dispersion, like there's less biases. We're seeing racial adoption across the board. Gender seems to now have evened out. So there's a lot to like about AIs as tutors, but we still don't know the answers. But we're sort of in this giant experiment anyway.
So now let's talk about workers, because at some level there's, what is going to happen to workers is a central question that I've talked about in other parts of the series. So we don't have to specifically talk about that. Because I think in some ways that's kind of a political policy institutional question as much as it's a sort of market forces question, or a technological question. But, one of the things you see all the time is like there's a little bit of this relic from the late 90s, early 21st century of like you need to understand how to use this stuff, and train up on it, or you're going to be left behind, right? And this was a big part of the late 90s and early aughts. And got to learn. You would put that you're proficient in Microsoft Word on your resume, or
Right.
Microsoft Excel. Like, oh, great, and that was a big part of getting into classrooms. To me, applying that framework here seems totally wrong, because the whole point is that there's no interface. You just talk to the thing. Like if the technology is as good as everyone's saying, which is the point at which it presents all these revolutionary possibilities, it's as good as people are saying because you just interact wherever. You don't have to like figure out where your file is buried in something. The whole point is to sidestep that. So like, why do people have to like get on board or be left behind? It's gonna, you're gonna use it or you're not gonna use it.
So, I mean, I think the broad picture is exactly right. Like, I think that AI literacy it's sort of, I worry a lot about bright line sort of teaching. Like, we'll teach judgment because the AI can't do judgment. Are you sure it can't do judgment? Like, can
Right.
it do even, it's not quite the same thing, but like, obviously they're making judgment calls all the time. AI literacy is similarly this amorphous thing, which is like, be good at AI is not something we know how to teach people. Like,
Right.
there used to be some people who are better at AI than others. Those tend to be people who are good at their job. Right, because they're good. They understand the AI makes mistakes kind of like a human does. And if you use as a fact checker, you would probably pretty quickly be like, no, you're too pedantic about this, and you're not paying enough attention to this.
Right.
And you could give it the feedback that would make it good. You'd be good at AI because you're a good manager of people. And I agree. That's a kind of concern. I mean, it's part of this general like reskilling for what is the kind of question.
Yes, exactly.
Like what is the reskilling? And that is, I think you said the right thing, which is in some ways this is a policy argument. This is about incentivizing organizations to do augmentation rather than replacement. It's about building the right incentives to make sure that there's support, right? We have a whole bunch of semi-broken, we're going into a crisis. There will be a prolonged long-term crisis, right? Let's say, by the way, that the most optimistic economist view, the general economist view, which is this all works out in the end, right? We've got 2 to 3 industrial revolutions that we have data on, depending on how you count them, and they all worked out in the end, but they kind of suck to live through, right? Like Charles Dickens is all about how much it sucks to live through an industrial revolution,
Yes.
right? Like
yes.
that's like, and so like, we want to cushion that. We're better at this stuff than we used to be. And I think we need to be thinking about the policy implications of this, which is, again, you're sort of saying, where am I in the hype scale, 0 to 10? My worry about the closer to 0 is that there's a lot of people who really just think AI is going to go away. That there's something here that this isn't real. The systems aren't as good as you say they are. They make mistakes. This is real. Companies are I talk to CEOs all the time. They are getting value out of it. It's, it's funny because they'll say things like, 10 million, 20 million here, nothing significant yet. But like, they're getting value out of these systems. There has not been major layoffs because of AI yet. I don't think that continues infinitely. Maybe people get better jobs, but like we need the systems in place to cushion it, which means we believe this is real. Right.
And I also think, we talk about reskilling, like to go back to the learn to code thing, right? Like there's pilot programs up and down this country of like the laid off, factory worker or someone who lost their job to trade adjust, there's a program called Trade Adjustment Assistance, which is sort of a notoriously failed program in many ways. But there's Trade
Adjustment
Assistance.
As is every reskilling program, honestly.
Exactly. As is every reskilling program, right? So, and it's like, what are you even reskilling for? Like, if it could do it, if it hits the points that we think, like, I don't know, tomorrow you could create an AI avatar who could deliver the news and, do my job. I mean, I think I'm going to be better at it. I think there's like advantages I have as a human because I'm kind of sort of producing a kind of form of human trust with the viewer. I think, but there's no like conceptual boundary at all to like fully automating my job. There's not. Whatever it is, if there's some innate human charisma or there's something like that matters. I don't know if there is or not, but there's nothing conceptually limiting it. And if it does get there, it's like, what the hell am I? What am I supposed to do?
So a few things. I mean, first of all, I think that again, we're in sort of a 0-1 realm. There's a realm like leave aside like there's all these interesting political currents, right? Every previous realm of adjustment was aimed at blue collar workers. When lawyers and news hosts lose their job, they have a lot more pull over over the economy and
Yes.
over policy responses, and they're
Correct.
not going to sit down, right? It's
No,
not. It's not.
I mean, yes.
They're not right. It's not going to be smashing the loons with hammers. It's going to be regulations saying you cannot. There needs to be a human approving each decision by the AI, and you
Yes.
can't have AI on news because it's untrustworthy. So it has to be a human delivering the news at all times. Like,
Right.
I mean, we'll see that reaction. But aside from that, I do think that let's go back to the jagged frontier idea. I mean, one thing among economists who are really savvy and I have been thinking about a lot is what's called the O-ring model for work, which is depressingly enough named after the space shuttle, where everything worked great except an O-ring failed, right?
This is in
And
the
so-
Challenger. Famously, the Challenger, the sort of point of failure was the O-ring, which had a temperature invariability that was not caught.
And a million other systems worked beautifully that day, right? And like one thing failed. And like there is a lot of work like that where a single error is multiplicative. And where AI, and it's not because AI is high error in that spot, but it might be that's the jagged frontier. It's you need this last bit of writing, otherwise everything sounds cloddy. You need a bit of randomness in your decision making. And the value of that job then flows to the choke point in the O-ring. Right. So I think what the jobs are not one thing. They're many tasks. You are not just reading the news, right? You're making editorial decisions. You're talking to me. You're doing research. Parts of those areas, right, might get taken by AI.
Now you sound like Claude,
Right. You're not, it was also three-thing list.
You're
This is
not
like,
just,
I promise
you're
I'm
not
a
just
human
a
watcher.
newsreader. You're not just a newsreader. You're
Let me think with this for a little bit, right? Oh my God! Actually, there's this great paper that shows that Claudisms are now spreading throughout written and oral talks, just because people are picking that up. Like, I loved M dashes, but anyway. Besides, moving all of that aside, so part of this issue though is that there's still then all the value of the news job still now rests on a different part of your job bundle. So, like, I think that people overestimate how much replacement, especially for complex white-collar tasks, is versus your job, what you do during the job changes, or part of your job, going back to coding, being an engineer manager suddenly becomes an incredibly valuable part of your job. Now, does that get automated at some point? Maybe, but then there's another part of the O-ring. So I think that people do have a little bit too sanguine of a view of what replacement looks like, especially when parts of that O-ring of tasks, some of those tasks are in the task chain are things you want a human to do. Like I think people do want a human newsreader. They'll want somebody who is making editorial decisions. They'll want to relate to you. And by the way, the imaginative version of destroying your job is not replace you with a video version of you. It's everybody who logs in gets a personalized version of Chris that is subtly tuned to their interests while still, like, it's an impossible version, not the easy substitute. So I do think that there's more to hope for this kind of work change. Doesn't mean there won't be disruption, but I think replacement is a harder task to imagine. And again, unless we have superintelligence, then we're all out of jobs and we're all gentlemen and gentlewomen scholars of the of the Victorian era, where we go to parties and play ball or something.
Yeah, while the agents do the work and produce
exactly.
Right. Well, the agents do the work, produce all of the sort of value that then produces GDP that then flows out somehow in a way and is distributed in
taxes.
Taxes.
Well, like we do, like that's the way it flows out, right? We tax the hell out of all use of AI systems.
Ethan Mollick's a professor at the Wharton Business School at the University of Pennsylvania, where he studies AI, its implications for education, entrepreneurship, and work. He's got a new book coming out in the fall called Coexistence, about working with AIs that are, he says, sometimes smarter than you. His last book, New York Times bestseller, Cointelligence, Living and Working with AI. And he writes the Substack, One Useful Thing. That was a really great conversation, Ethan. Thank you so much.
That was terrific. Thank you for having me.